I fired a man for stealing $50 from the break room. 3 days later, I found out he was using that money to buy insulin for his daughter. And that's the day I realized I wasn't running a company. I was running away from who I used to be. Let me back up. My name doesn't matter for this story. What matters is what I did, and what it cost me before I understood it. I want to tell you something you might not expect. I used to be poor. Not tight on cash. Poor. I mean the kind of poor where you learn which grocery stores throw out bread at night. The kind where you memorize which bus driver won't ask for your fare twice if you sit near the front and look tired enough. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment with my mom and my younger brother. My dad left when I was 9. I don't talk about that much. Some wounds don't heal, they just stop bleeding out loud. My mom cleaned offices. Every night, she'd take the bus to some building downtown, and she'd vacuum carpets that other people walked on all day without a second thought. She wore a uniform that didn't fit right. She smelled like industrial cleaner when she came home. And some nights, I'd wait up for her, just to make sure she got home safe. I used to feel embarrassed about that. I'm not proud of that feeling, but I'm being honest with you. I told myself I'd never be like that. I'd never clean up after anyone. I studied hard. I worked 2 jobs through college. I clawed my way into business school on scholarships and loans I'm still paying off, if I'm honest. And somewhere along the way, something in me changed. I stopped being the kid whose mom cleaned offices. I became someone who owned buildings full of people who did the cleaning. You might be wondering how that happened so fast. Trust me, it didn't feel fast. It felt like 10 years of 16-hour days, of skipping meals to save money, of sleeping 4 hours a night while building a logistics company from a garage with 2 employees. But eventually it worked. By the time I was 34, I was CEO of a company with over 300 employees. Nice office. Corner view. The whole thing. And here's the part I'm not proud of. Somewhere in that climb, I forgot where I came from. I told myself I was building a tight ship. I told myself rules were rules, and if you don't enforce them, you don't respect your own company. I used words like accountability and standards a lot. Looking back, I think I was using those words to feel powerful. To feel like the kid who used to wait up for his mom didn't exist anymore. So let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus was our head janitor. 61 years old. Been with the company almost 11 years, since before I even took over as CEO. Quiet guy. Always early. Always the last one to leave. I'll be honest with you, before that day, I don't think I'd said more than 20 words to him in 3 years. I knew his name because it was on the building roster. That's it. Then one morning, my assistant comes into my office looking uncomfortable. She tells me there's a discrepancy in the break room petty cash box, the one we use for coffee supplies and small office needs. $50 missing. And the security footage showed Marcus taking it the night before. I remember feeling this cold, sharp anger. Not because of the money. Honestly, $50 was nothing to a company our size. It was the principle. That's what I told myself. Principle. I called him into my office that same day. I still remember how he looked. Tired. Older than I'd noticed before. He stood there with his cap in his hands like he was in some old movie, and he didn't argue. He didn't even try to explain. He just said, "I understand." And I fired him. Right there. No severance conversation. No real discussion. I told HR to process it immediately. You know what's strange? I felt nothing that day. I actually felt good. Like I'd proven something. Like I'd shown my team that no one gets special treatment, not even the guy who'd been mopping our floors for over a decade. I went home that night and told myself I'd done the right thing. But something kept nagging at me. A tiny itch in the back of my mind. The way he said "I understand" instead of defending himself. People who steal for greed usually get defensive. People who steal out of desperation, they just accept it. Like they expected to get caught eventually. I ignored that feeling for 2 days. Then, on the third day, one of our maintenance staff, a young guy named Diego who used to work alongside Marcus, came to my office. He looked nervous, like he wasn't sure he should be there. He said, "Sir, I need to tell you something about Marcus." I told him to sit down. And that's when my whole world tilted. Diego told me Marcus had a granddaughter, 8 years old, who he'd been raising alone since his daughter passed away 2 years earlier from a car accident. Marcus was her only guardian. No wife. No other family close by. Just him and this little girl. And this little girl had type 1 diabetes. Diego told me Marcus's insurance had a gap, some issue with paperwork renewal that hadn't gone through in time, and for almost 3 weeks, Marcus had been paying out of pocket for her insulin. Full price. Do you know what that costs without insurance? It can run into hundreds of dollars a month, sometimes more, depending on the brand and dosage. Marcus made maybe $17 an hour. He'd been skipping his own lunches, selling some of his tools. And that night, the night of the theft, he was $50 short of what he needed to get her next dose before the pharmacy closed. He panicked, and he took the money from the break room box, fully intending to pay it back on his next check, which was 2 days away. I remember sitting there feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. I asked Diego why Marcus didn't just tell me. Why didn't he explain? Diego looked at me for a long moment, and honestly, his answer hit me harder than anything else in this whole story. He said, "Sir, would it have mattered? You didn't even ask him why." I didn't have an answer for that. Because he was right. I hadn't asked? Not once. I'd walked into that conversation already believing I knew everything I needed to know. That night I didn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mom. About all those nights she came home smelling like bleach and exhaustion, breaking her back cleaning up after strangers just so my brother and I could eat. I thought about how, if she'd ever been in Marcus's position, desperate, scared, out of options, I would have wanted someone to ask her why. Not just fire her like she was disposable. And I realized something that shook me to my core. I had become the kind of person who would have fired my own mother without blinking. I want to pause here for a second, because I think a lot of people who are watching this might relate to this feeling. Maybe you've climbed out of something hard. Maybe you've worked yourself to the bone to get somewhere better. And somewhere along the way, without meaning to, you started looking down on the people still in the place you came from. It doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in slowly. Every promotion, every bit of success, it adds a little distance. And one day you wake up and you don't recognize the person you've become. That's exactly where I was. The next morning, I didn't go straight to the office. I drove to the address on file for Marcus. My hands were actually shaking on the steering wheel. I don't think I'd been that nervous since my first pitch meeting for the company, years earlier. I knocked on the door of a small, worn-down house on the edge of town, and Marcus opened it. He looked surprised to see me. Not angry. Just surprised. Like he genuinely didn't understand why the man who fired him was standing on his porch. Behind him, I saw a little girl sitting on the couch, coloring in a notebook. She looked up at me with these big curious eyes, and I swear, something in my chest just cracked open. I asked Marcus if I could come in and talk. He hesitated, but he let me. I sat across from him in that small living room, and for the first time in longer than I'd like to admit, I actually listened to someone instead of judging them. He told me everything. About his daughter's accident 2 years earlier. About suddenly becoming a full-time father again in his 60s. About the insurance paperwork mix-up that left him scrambling. About how ashamed he felt taking that money, and how he'd planned to put it back before anyone even noticed. He said, "I've never stolen anything in my life. Not one time. I don't expect you to believe that. But I had to choose between my pride and my granddaughter's health. I chose her." I sat there in silence for a long moment, because honestly, I didn't know what to say. What do you say to that? Finally, I told him the truth. I told him I was wrong. I told him that I judged him without asking a single question, and that it was the worst decision I'd made as a leader, maybe as a person, in a long time. I want to be honest with you here, because I think it's important. I didn't do this next part because it made good business sense, or because I wanted good PR. I did it because I needed to fix something inside myself, not just something in my company. I offered him his job back that same day, with a formal apology in writing. But I didn't stop there. I personally covered the cost of his granddaughter's medical gap until his insurance renewal cleared. I made sure our HR department fixed the exact same paperwork loopholes so it could never trap another employee like that again. And then I did something that changed the whole direction of my company. I sat down with our HR team and we created something we called the Employee Support Fund, a confidential emergency resource for anyone on staff, from janitorial to management, who hits a genuine crisis. Medical emergencies, family tragedies, situations where someone might otherwise feel like they have no choice but to make a desperate decision. You might be wondering why I'm telling you all this. Believe me, it's not to make myself look like some kind of hero. Honestly, the opposite. I'm telling you this because I almost destroyed a good man's life over $50, simply because I stopped asking why. Because success made me forget that everyone is carrying something you can't see. There's a version of this story where I never find out the truth. Where Marcus just quietly disappears from the company roster, goes home, and somehow finds a way to keep his granddaughter alive without me ever knowing what I did. That version of the story exists in 100 companies right now, today, all over the world. People getting fired, evicted, judged, dismissed, while the people making those decisions never bother to ask a single question. I think about that a lot. I think about my mom, cleaning offices at midnight so we could eat. I think about how easy it would have been for someone in power to treat her the way I treated Marcus. And I think about how far I drifted from that kid who used to wait up for her, worried and grateful all at once. Marcus still works with us today. His granddaughter is doing well. Her insurance is fully sorted now, and last I heard, she's been asking him if she can visit the office sometime to see where he works. He said yes. Every time I walk past him in the hallway now, we actually talk. Real conversations. Not just a nod and a morning. I know about his granddaughter's favorite cartoons. He knows I grew up watching my mom do the same work he does. We're not just employer and employee anymore. We're just two people who understand something about each other. I think about this whole experience almost every day. Not because it makes me feel good about myself. Honestly, it still makes me a little sick to think about how close I came to letting my ego destroy someone's life. But because it reminds me of something I never want to forget again. Behind every mistake, every late payment, every unprofessional moment, there might be a story you know nothing about. A parent trying to keep their child alive. A person drowning quietly, too proud or too scared to ask for help. I used to think being a strong leader meant being tough. Meant enforcing rules without exception. Now I think real strength is having the humility to ask why before you judge. To remember that everyone you meet is fighting something you can't see. I don't share this story to look like a good person. I share it because I was almost a very bad one, and I think a lot of us are closer to that line than we'd like to admit. Success has a way of making us forget where we came from. It convinces us that our own hardship gives us some kind of authority to judge everyone else's. It doesn't. If anything, it should make us more understanding, not less. So here's what I want to ask you, if you're still watching this. Have you ever judged someone too quickly? Fired someone, walked away from someone, given up on someone, without asking why first? I'd really like to know. Tell me in the comments. I read every single one, and honestly, hearing other people's version of this story helps me feel a little less alone in mine. And if this story moved you even a little bit, if it made you think about your own mom, your own struggle, Your own moment where you almost became someone you didn't recognize. Do me a favor. Hit subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Because somewhere out there, right now, there's probably another Marcus. Another person one difficult decision away from losing everything, just trying to keep the people they love alive. Maybe the next time you're about to judge someone, you'll pause. You'll ask why. That one question might change someone's life. It changed mine.